On today's Locked On Jayhawks, recapping KU basketball's exhibition charity game lost to Illinois 82-75.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. You can also like and subscribe to our show on our YouTube page. We did a bunch of recap stuff with the KU-Oklahoma game. We're going to have more KU-Oklahoma recap on our next episode. But here, we're recapping the KU basketball game falling 82-75 to Illinois in the charity exhibition game. First, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy with PrizePicks. So KU falls 82-75 to Illinois, charity exhibition game on the road being played in Champaign. It was a return for Bill Self to Illinois. It was, in a sense, a return for Hunter Dickinson to the Big Ten days and playing Illinois, a team that he, I guess, still has not beaten in his time at the collegiate level. Certainly there was, I guess an interesting tidbit to start the game because Elmarko Jackson started the game at the two-guard spot, at the shooting guard spot. There was obviously no Johnny Furphy. He had the shin splint issues, and so he was unable to go for this game. And I think that hurt a little bit because he certainly, to me, feels like somebody who, is probably in line to play like seventh most minutes on the team. You kind of look at it like Timberlake or Elmarko, whoever doesn't start, that guy will probably play the most minutes off the bench. Furphy probably the second most minutes, at least based on the projection of what he could be. Now, for all we know, McDowell will be in front of him, and maybe he gets buried out, or maybe the lack of reps going on right now with getting to not practice because of the injury, maybe that hinders him, maybe that affects things here. But I do think Johnny Furphy is going to be a good player for KU. But Elmarko started at the two, so there is that takeaway right away of saying, okay, clearly he has the upper hand on this. Now, we can hold that assumption, we can hold that reservation or opinion for now. If we get to Wednesday and the KU Fort Hays State second exhibition game, they start Nick Timberlake, then I think we'll look back on Elmarko Jackson starting against Illinois and just say, okay, it's like how Bill Self was operating in the games in Puerto Rico, in that they started a different shooting guard all three games to give guys different looks. I don't know if that's going to be what Bill Self's plan is here, or if this is an indication Elmarko's the guy in front of him. Now, it is interesting that Elmarko played like 25, 26 minutes in the game, and Timberlake was in the teens. So maybe that is indicative that, yes, he is indeed in front of him, and the starting was a notion of that. Then again, who knows where Johnny Furphy kind of factors in to all of this sort of stuff. But that is kind of interesting. And right now, you'd obviously have to make your lineup projection based on what we just saw with Elmarko Jackson at the two. And Elmarko, didn't have stats that jump off the page. He didn't have a great game or anything, but neither did Nick Timberlake to make you think, oh, he's going to usurp him. Kind of a weird game from Hunter Dickinson, to say the least, right? It was a tough start for Hunter Dickinson. I think it's pretty apparent to me he was tight in the game. Was he tight because he wanted to beat Illinois so bad, a team that he's had some animosity with some of the fan base and stuff, and so he was tight because he really wanted to get that done? Was he tight because it was early season rust, or because it was one of his first games in Kansas uniform? I know you have the Puerto Rico games and the late night, the fog scrimmage and stuff, but this felt more like a real actual game. So were you just kind of tight there? Missing some early shots that I feel like he normally would have kind of made. But it's a weird game because even though that stuff happened, you look at the stat sheet at the end of the day, and Hunter Dickinson put up 22 points and 9 rebounds. So here we are, where you felt like it was a bit of a more lethargic Hunter Dickinson game. And yeah, there are reasons to still think that. I mean, he took 20 shots to get to the 22 points. That was a lot. He had 0 assists for a guy who is a good passer. He had some defensive struggles maybe with how Illinois, with how Coleman Hawkins was attacking him, with how they were kind of approaching, playing against him in ball screens and stuff. And I will say, like, Illinois is going to know how to play against him probably better than some of the other teams you're going to play either in the non-con or the Big 12 because they haven't seen him as much as Illinois has. And then you have the early misses. He did bank in a 3, which adds to the weirdness of the game. And honestly, it wasn't the best Hunter Dickinson game, and that has to be one of the best signs from this game that came out of it. I'm not saying Hunter Dickinson played bad. I thought he played a fine game. I just don't think it was one of his best games. And I'm sure if you asked him, he would say, yeah, I wish I would have played better. But I think that's a great sign, because if you're talking about that this ended up being just a mid, kind of whatever Hunter Dickinson game, and he put up 22 and 9. What does the good Hunter Dickinson game look like? 25 and 12. What is what is Hunter Dickinson going off game? What is the Hunter Dickinson can't be stopped game look like? 30 and 15. I don't know. Like, it is clear KU is going to feed him a lot and let him go to work. And so if you're playing against a team who doesn't have as good of big men like Coleman Hawkins and Dane Danger, if you're playing a team who hasn't played against him as much and isn't able to scout against him as much, if you're playing a game where he has a better game, those numbers are going to be absolutely unbelievable for Hunter Dickinson this year. Now, as far as the game, he had a ton of fouls called overall both ways. I mean, it felt like there was a moment there in the second half where every time Illinois was driving, they were getting a foul call on KU. And I'm not even saying that necessarily like it was like bad. There were a few calls that, yeah, of course I disagreed with. There's going to be calls over the course of the game that both fan bases are going to disagree with one way or another. But it was just clunky, man. And for an exhibition, like to have the reviews and to have all these foul calls, it's like, what are we doing? Can we not just play? Maybe that'll be a good teaching tool for the players, because probably in practices with each other, you're fouling yourselves more than you would in a game. And you have to get used to the game whistle. That's going to be a little bit tighter than that. But yeah, lack of kind of shooting for KU certainly stood out in this game. You did have a few minutes of slog where it felt like a handful of minute stretch where you really struggled on the offensive end. But actually in the end, some of your numbers and like points per possession stuff actually ended up pretty good, especially considering Illinois has a good defense, or at least is expected to have a good defense after they had one last year and are kind of expected to once again this year. Defense did have some issues defending the arc, defending the three-point line, defending ball screens, defending pick and pops. So those are things to kind of keep note of and put in your back pocket. But it's hard. It's hard when you're talking about a first game and trying to detail, because some of this stuff, like maybe they haven't gone over yet. We heard from Bill Self at Big 12 Media Day that they go into their offense more than their defense. They haven't gone into everything about how they're going to cover pick and pops, how they're going to cover screen and rolls, how they're going to cover this. Are they going to hard hedge? Are they going to play drop coverage? Like, where are they going to switch? When are they not going to switch? They haven't done some of that stuff yet. So it's hard to pick too much. And it's hard to be like, well, that didn't look good. That's a sign of things to come. Yeah, maybe some of the stuff is signs of things to come. Like the three-point shooting, that could be a sign of things to come, because I never really expected this to be a great three-point shooting team. But there are other things where it's like, yeah, but that could just look better in 2 weeks. That could look better in 2 months. That could look better in March. I don't know. So even despite all kind of the weird stuff and things that didn't go your way and the things you didn't do well, you lost in a close game on the road against a team who is ranked 25th in the preseason poll, but they're ranked 19th in KenPom in the preseason. And that Illinois team, I think we saw, like talent-wise, I think they have 4 players who are fifth year or better. They've got some really talented players. If Coleman Hawkins is taking that next step, which moments it looked like it, Terrence Shannon looked like an All-American. That is a talented enough Illinois team that they could compete to win the Big Ten title, that they could be a top 15, top 10 team in the country. But at the very least, they're being picked 19th. It's a top 25 team. You lost close on the road. Like I'm not holding this against KU at all. They lost to Illinois supposedly in a secret scrimmage last year by like a point. And guess what? Last year's Kansas team, they ended up being the 3rd overall 1 seed and won the Big 12 in one of the toughest years that they've ever had with the Big 12. And guess what? Over the course of a season, like even the teams who are number 1, number 2, number 5, whatever, top 5, top 10 teams, you still lose a handful plus of games. And a lot of those games happen when you're playing top 25-ish opponents on the road. It happens, right? So it's almost unfortunate that the game was on TV, because if this was a secret scrimmage, you probably worry less about it. And, it was so early in the season. It featured the weird foul rule. Like, who knows how that would have changed things with players if they foul out or not, like how that affects how players play. Coleman Hawkins would have fouled out. Kevin McCullar or KJ Adams would have fouled out, but would they have played different? I don't know. It's so hard to say with all this stuff. And obviously, I don't know how much like game planning goes into it too. Like, are you actually scouting for the opponent and stuff? Probably not in a situation like this. You're more so trying to figure out what you need to self-scout in the end of this. So certainly some things KU needs to do better, and certainly some questions I have about possible flaws, but they're just kind of questions that we had coming into the game that were kind of accentuated in this one, and nothing really new popped up to make me overly worried that this happens. I didn't really expect this to be one of those Kansas teams that only loses 2 or 3 games over the course of the season. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up being the 7th best team in the country. Okay, that's whatever. But that still puts you in range. Could they win a national title? Could they make a Final Four? Like, yeah, absolutely. And let's not overreact to one game. Now, if you are looking for the thing that was maybe most, Kansas only led for 1 minute, Illinois led for 36. But that's happened in other road games too, that Kansas win in Big 12 play. All right, we're going to get to more of this goats of the game, good and bad, here on Locked On Jayhawks. First, though, this episode of the show is brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Now time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. I guess if we want to go to KU football or KU, let's be positive. Let's go with KU football. You know, I talked the other day about the one, obviously, the Jason Bean conversion to Lawrence Arnold. What about another big play? J.B. Brown sticking the running back, forcing a fumble. KU recovers. Big moment in the game. You needed each and every one of the 3 turnovers that you did force. Although I guess the one on the kickoff you ended up not being able to score on. But that's neither here nor there. That was a game-changing play for KU. That's what Athletic Brewing Company has done to change the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. The brews are great tasting, award-winning. They beat out full-strength beers in global competition with over 50 styles of craft and non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, Sours, and more. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, at checkout for 15% off your first order at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions, and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. We're also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, continuing on here with our goats of the game for KU basketball after falling to Illinois 82-75. We'll start with our good, finish up with our bad. If you're new to the segment, good goats. You know, that's the new age version of the word, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Bad goats, when I was growing up, that was a bad thing if you were the GOAT. It was like short for scapegoat, right? It was not good to be the GOAT. So good goats here. We have Kevin McCullar. He got hurt at the end there, which that sucked because that would have been by far the biggest negative takeaway. KU's obviously very thin, not very deep and everything. But on top of that, like Kevin McCullar looking to have a big season. We've seen him have injuries in the past. And boy, did he have a good game. But sounds like he's okay. Bill Self said in the postgame it was just like whiplash stuff. So I think he'll be all right. He had 25 points, 9 of 14 shooting, 2 of 3 from three-point range, 8 rebounds. It's a slight difference in how the three-point shot looks, but it looks a little more clean. It looks a little bit higher, looks like a little bit slightly quicker release. Beyond that, he just looks so much more confident and looks like he has a little bit more in his bag on the offensive end, that he has more that he can get to. And he's just been so good on that end. On FanDuel, you can get him 200-1 to a National Player of the Year. I don't know if it'll happen. It's going to be tough. There's all these big men who put up like 22 and 10. And if Kevin McCullar puts up 18 and 6, how is that going to fare the other way? I think, you know, it should fare well when you look at his defense and everything. But I don't know. Why not? It's a fun little bet that you can have there. He was awesome, though. KJ Adams gets a good goat here. 14 points. He went 6 of 10 shooting from the floor. Good efficiency there. 4 rebounds, 3 assists. He was really smart about when to cut, when to move around. We did see him take a 3. The 3 didn't look super good. It didn't look as clean as when it was in Puerto Rico, but he's going to continue to need to shoot those and or mid-range shots to make defenses sag off. But one thing that you can do is with defenses sagging off is cut and try to take advantage of that. And he did that a good amount. And there was the one offensive putback on an offensive rebound. Like, I thought he had a pretty good game overall. And also, like, switching on the defensive end, I was impressed with how KJ Adams looked as you're continuing to see, well, how does he fit in as more of a perimeter player, kind of forward type? The inside scoring for KU was actually really good. This is something we talked about in our preview show for the KU-Illinois game, that Illinois was number 1 in the Big Ten last season in Big Ten-only games in 2-point offense and 2-point defense. And they were top 25 in the country in both 2-point offense and 2-point defense overall. Well, KU led Illinois 50-22 in points in the paint. So you limited them from getting to the paint for the most part, and you easily got in the paint the other way. Now, part of that could be strategic. Obviously, for Illinois, they probably were more content to take open threes and stretch it out a little bit with, you having basically a couple big men and more of a lumbering center in there that they wanted to have Coleman Hawkins fire up threes and stuff. So part of that's strategic, but still 50-22 points in the paint, that's pretty dominant. And for what it's worth, you held Illinois to 14 of 29, which is slightly below 50% on 2-point shots. That's not a number you're going to celebrate about, or that's some outlier, unbelievable number. But again, I mentioned Illinois led the Big Ten in 2-point offense last year. They shot 54% in Big Ten games last year. You held them below 50%. So in theory, you had a pretty good game there. Meanwhile, KU shot 55% on twos in this one. And again, that would have been better than Illinois, who led the Big Ten, a conference filled with all sorts of big men and gigantic dudes in 2-point shots. So actually, your inside offense was pretty good. And going back to the Hunter Dickinson weird game thing, like Hunter Dickinson missed some shots he probably normally makes in other games. So that number could have gone up even more. I'll also mention in good goat here, just the athleticism of Elmarko Jackson. That was very apparent from watching the game a couple times. There were some flash plays. Unfortunately, though, it was just a few flash plays, and it wasn't something that led to a bunch of success in one way or another. That brings us to our bad goats of the game. Shooting is a bad goat here, both in terms of volume and efficiency from 3-point range, and then the free throw shooting. So you only took 12 threes. That number needs to go up. Teams are going to start sagging off at some point in the season if you're only taking 12 threes a game. On top of it, they only hit 3 of them. 2 of them came from Kevin McCullar. Everyone else on the team was 1 of 9 from 3-point range. They're going to have to find some success of 3-point shooting. And I don't know where the answers are necessarily. DeJuan is more of a, if I'm open, I'll take it guy. Same with kind of Hunter Dickinson in set plays. Elmarko Jackson, like you're probably only going to take the wide open ones there. It'd be great if Nick Timberlake was playing more to get up more threes, but he's got to do the other things well to get that more playing time. And even then, it didn't lead to him hitting a bunch of threes in this game. Johnny Furphy, maybe that's somewhere where he can make a mark or an impact on this team coming back and being one of your better 3-point shooters, but you need the 3-point shooting to go up. Kansas also just went 63% on free throws, so that's not great either. Let's see. Our next bad goat here. Guarding pick and pops and ball screen defense. As I talked about, this could be something that gets better the more you go over it, the more you practice, the more the season goes on. So there are ways that this could have just been bad because it is so early on, and that's a communication thing or whatever. But it helped Illinois go 11 of 27 from 3-point range because of your poor ball screen defense at times, guarding pick and pops. They shot 41% from 3 with Coleman Hawkins and Terrence Shannon combining for 9 of the team's 11 made threes. I think that's going to be something that bothers KU all year. If you have a stretch 5, it's going to cause you problems. Now, not every team has a stretch 5. It's more of a rarity, so that is the good news. But we've seen before KU have really good teams in the NCAA tournament and play teams with a stretch 5 when they had a lumbering big man, caused them problems, right? So that would be something I'm keeping an eye on very early in the season that could come up depending on a matchup possibly as late as March. Rebounding gets a bad goat here. KU was out-rebounded by 7. They lost the second chance points by 4. There was a stretch there where it felt like they were getting beat on a lot of hustle balls, and Bill Self even said so during the broadcast in one of the kind of midway interviews that they were doing during the game. And the thing is here, like, Illinois is a fine rebounding team, but if you're going to play with essentially 2, whether that's Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, Parker Brown, whatever mismatch of bigs, if you're playing with 2 bigs, you're going to clearly lose some ability to shoot the basketball or space the floor. You have to make up for that in other areas. You have to make up for it in defense. You have to make up for it in rebounding. You have to be able to, if you're going to play big, rebound like you're playing big and not lose in that area. So that's something you're looking to get better. And maybe once the lights come on and it's not an exhibition game, you'll see that level kind of go up. The last bad goat here I got is the other guys, so to speak. KU should feel good about the 3 returning starters with DeJuan, Kevin, and KJ, and then Hunter Dickinson, who you added on, just from like a big picture perspective, not necessarily talking about this game, just big picture. You feel good about those 4. You're still trying to develop who's going to be the other starter, the 5th starter at the 2 spot, who's going to be the guys coming off the bench. Are you going to get enough punch from the guys coming off the bench in however far the rotation goes and playing in those role spots? Well, against Illinois, the combination of Elmarko Jackson, Jamari McDowell, Parker Brown, and Nick Timberlake, those players who you feel like are going to be part of that rotation, played a combined 54 minutes. They scored just 8 points on 4 of 10 shooting. They had just 4 rebounds and 3 assists. And at times it felt like some or multiple of those guys were just kind of out there drifting along. And just furthering this, KU had 4 total bench points in a charity game where you should have been playing deeper on the bench. Can Johnny Furphy save this? Maybe a little bit, but that's something that has to go up because we saw that so many times last year that the bench was not giving you a punch, that the other guys were not giving you a punch. And that's something that you thought would be better on this year's team with the way they reshaped the roster in the offseason. You didn't see it against Illinois. All right, we're going to continue on with what's next for the KU basketball team. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. You can test your skills on PrizePicks this football or basketball season in the most exciting way possible. It's really simple to play. You can make your picks, submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. And they have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. And that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. You'll be able to get KU basketball in there, KU football in there. I know I was just big on the KU football with Jason Bean and Mason Fairchild and some of those. It was a fun weekend when you add to it that not only did KU beat OU, but you might have hit big on PrizePicks. PrizePicks.com/lockedoncollege with code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Finishing things up, early look at what's next for KU basketball. So they'll be back at it on Wednesday. That'll be a bit of an easier exhibition for them. Fort Hays State in Allen Fieldhouse on Wednesday night. The real thing will be next Monday for their first regular season game. Got kind of like 2 cupcakes before they get into the Champions Classic game. How much better can Kansas get in a week or two before the Champions Classic? Can you take this to the next level, right? Honestly, more than you'd think. Because early in the season, things are moving exponentially and how much better you're getting. And, actual having college games and tape and scouting reports and that sort of stuff, you're going to really see the level of play rise, or at least you hope it does, because otherwise bad things in store if it doesn't, over the next couple of weeks of play. Even then, though, there are going to be certain growing pains early in the season. That's the beauty of these next 3 games, including this exhibition with Fort Hays State. It's going to more so just be about what are you doing? What are you doing internally? What are you doing self-inflicted, as opposed to what your opponent is doing, as maybe the Illinois game was, where it's like, well, if you do something bad, it's going to be taken advantage of more with Illinois. This gives you a little bit easier of a launching pad into the Champions Classic, while also now having in mind of the Illinois game of what happens to be like, okay, if we don't do this well, that's what happens. So Fort Hays State on Wednesday. We'll have a basketball preview for it coming up later this week. Locked on Jayhawks. Tomorrow's episode, more KU Oklahoma talk from the Jayhawks football win there. Make sure you're catching our podcast anywhere you get any of your podcasts. You can find us on our YouTube page as well. Like and subscribe to the show. We'll see you next time with Locked on Jayhawks. Have a great rest of your day.